Hi, this is Rants. This module is on pruning practices for Zone 2, 3, and 4 in Alberta here. I guess Saskatchewan, you include it too. But basically, I'm just going to talk over some of these practices that we've done over the years here in Southern Alberta and Lethbridge in particular. My name is Grant Calling. I'm a certified arborist here in Southern Alberta. Relay pruning, clematis growing on the side of a building is probably the best example, rather than coming in and just giving it a haircut overall and having all that growth at the top. We do is we've got this up against the wall, so we're going to take off, a quarter of this one, a half of this one, a quarter of this one, a half of this one. What that does is it enhances the flowering and allows the plant to get a little fuller, a little richer, and a little healthier as well too. And I'm moving the nutrients so far that not moving the elements so far in the plant, so that it's hard for it to defend itself against things like whiteflies and aphids and stuff. Anyway, so that's relay pruning. Pleaching, you got a pathway, bike path, roadway, driveway, whatever, out to the barn for the horses and that kind of thing. You see it in Europe a lot. We've only done 2 sites here on this, but we take the branches that are growing over the pathway, and we'll do a notch into one here and the other one opposing notch, and we will slide them together and basically grafting wax or tie it off, whatever, what have you, as far as getting that graft to work for you. And that'll create a nice tunnel, and the plants can share water and they can share nutrients as well. So that would be pleaching. Nicking and notching, done an awful lot of that because, well, too often I forget my secateurs. So with nicking, what you're trying to do is stop the development of a certain bud. So if you're trying to create a 1 foot separation in an espaliered grape, for example, and you don't want those buds to develop, particularly growing out or towards the fence, then you're going to nick those prior to the bud, right at the base of the bud. And you can use a pocket knife or just your thumb and just peel that little bit of cambium off the plant there. If you want that bud to fully develop and start growing out, because that's where you're going to continue your espalier process, or cordon, or any of those other practices that are controlling the height and size of a plant, then you're going to be doing notching. So you encourage that bud to develop by notching just above the bud. I usually go about half my thumb length out, so that if there is some disease or some issues with sap flow or whatever, it's not going to affect that bud. That bud's going to be able to develop up properly. Pollarding and topping, typically after a storm, you're going to have some broken branches. People don't always want their tree removed. So I try to encourage them to plant new tree, for starters, of similar stature, similar nature. And then we do the topping of the original tree. We did that at the hospital when they got the new helicopter. It was a much bigger helicopter than they had before, so the trees couldn't be as tall as they were. So rather than just remove them and plant baby trees there and start the process all over, what we did was we took the tops off of them, sort of type thing, and let that develop from there, knowing that we'd have to come back and do more as we went along, and the planting could happen a couple of years down the road when the budget facilitated for that. So topping is something that we can do. I don't recommend it. It's not a pruning practice. It's a result of a uncontrollable event, as far as I'm concerned. Now, once that you do that topping cut, you always see that flush of growth that you see coming out of there. That's where you can begin your pollarding process. So that flush of growth will come out. You don't want to recut that knuckle, that hardened knuckle that's developed on top of that topping cut. You just want to cut all those little fine shoots that come off. Once you can do it annually, biannually, or once every 4 or 5 years, whatever your liking is. But that's what you're cutting, is that top off. That's pollarding. Okay. So there are different practices basically, but one is the initial start of the other, so to speak. So crown reduction. Now that's typically trying to keep a tree into a smaller spot than it naturally wants to be. We've had some big trees that go over 2-3 yards, poplars in particular, cottonwoods. The odd elm has done that too. So what we'll do is we'll take it back to a suitable lateral. The lateral that you're cutting back, that you're cutting off, cutting back to, should be at least 1/3 the diameter of the branch that you're leaving on. So that if you imagine a hose with 10 gallons a minute going through it, you're not going to get that into a syringe, right? So you're going to cause a health issue with that tree if you're taking it too far back. So 1/3 the diameter of the branch that remains. You have to have a suitable branch that's 1/3 the size of the diameter of the originating branch. Clear as mud. Okay. So that's crown reduction, overall reducing the size of the tree without topping. So providing clearance, you see lots of service lines. You should call for a service drop. If you can't get a service drop, or if there's an issue, snow or whatever, wind going on, it's braiding on a service line, then you can do a providing clearance cut, and basically you're trying to get it away from the service line. And don't forget your internodal growth. So if you're just cutting it back 18 inches and the tree grows 18 inches a year, you're going to cut that back again next year. So if you've got 18 inches of internodal growth on a particular species of willow, for example, you're going to have, and you only want to do this once every 3 or 4 years or 5 years or whatever it is. You got 18 times 3 times 5, however many years you want that to happen. So that use your internodal growth to know how far back you have to come to allow for that clearance to last several years. We do it for lawnmower clearances. We do it for vistas. If you want to see out, to the mountain view or the coulee view or whatever. We'll crown raise things up to allow for that, and that's called providing clearance as well. Alley clearances. Utility guys do this all the time. So that the garbage trucks aren't destroying your trees. They just get those clearances up over top of that 14-foot truck or 16-foot truck or 12-foot truck, whatever the garbage truck height is, or on a bus route, same type of thing. You'll see the city guys doing that kind of stuff too. So. Copacing is something we do. It's a practice we don't do here because we get late frosts and early frosts, which actually kills the plant, because right off the crown of the plant, you're putting your shrub right down to the crown of the plant, and then you get that flush of growth, and then you get a frost, and that kills the whole plant. Whereas if you do a reduction cut, or reduction of the overall shrub, you're taking it down to a certain height, and then you've got 7 or 8, 10 laterals that are there. So if they do flush and they get a frost, it's okay, because you can take those off and you still have the crown of the plant, the stored energy in that plant. And we do that on shrubs, in particular potentillas and barberries, and lots of smaller headed shrubs, weiglas and stuff like that. Anything that's vegetatively reproducing, you can get away with that on. And what that does is allows the plant to be at its best color, at its best growth, because it doesn't have as far to move the nutrients and water for that particular plant. It's a shorter distance to move in the vascular system. Espalier, I think I kind of described that with the grapes. Horizontal growth of a tree, and this you can do this with a lot of different trees. So these people with all these tower poplars for privacy in their backyards, you don't have to have those trees, and they're terrible trees. They're terribly expensive to maintain, and they're buggy, they're diseasey, they're suckering up in your lawns. I mean, they're not good trees. One tree, espalier, you can do 5, 6, 7 layers, however high you want to go with those laterals, and it's a matter of nicking and notching on those branches to get that tree to develop all the way across your backyard. Maybe 2 trees, who knows, lindens or whatever. But this planting of tower poplars and columnar aspens and all that genetically altered stuff is just it's at least half my business every year of spraying and fertilizing. So I don't recommend those trees at all. Anyway, espalier is what we do with particularly with fruit trees. Cordons, if you got a very narrow spot in your yard, it's a tunnel to get out to the the back alley, back lane, garbage can, whatever, and you only have 10 inches of area where the tree can grow, you can do a cordon, and a cordon looks just like that. So here's the trunk of the tree, and here's the upper canopy of the tree, and you're constantly notching back to those buds there to keep that tree at that size and flat, so you can have an actual flat tree, and you can use that in your backyard as well instead of those tower poplars and columnar aspens. So that's cordon. Crown cleaning, deadwood, anytime, any tree, no problem. Providing clearances, we kind of covered that with the alley stuff. Bark tracing, somebody's backed into your tree, or your car accident, came around a corner and hit the tree in the front yard, big scar on there. You take a sharp knife and you cut a teardrop shape around the damage and peel all that bark off so you don't get insect infestations in there. It's not releasing any pheromones, and it can callus over properly, and the moisture can drain out. Okay, so nice clean cut in a teardrop shape. That is called bark tracing. Thinning, I don't recommend thinning at all. All you're doing is exposing one side of the tree to winds that they've never experienced, or snow loads. Just not a good practice. There's no need for thinning whatsoever on any tree. That's just not a practice you need to be doing. Topiary, now you can use wire cages or wooden structures to develop the shape that you want. To make Mickey Mouse ears on your Siberian cedar in the front yard. You can do that. Utilizing props and stuff to hold it up, or just if you start early enough when the plant is small enough, you can develop that plant to grow into that shape too as well. So any shape you want. I've got a football in my front yard for the Calgary Stampeders. Just kidding. So that's um, the practice of topiary, which we didn't do really a lot of that. It's to me, it's a lot like shearing. I don't do that either. So if you've got a codominant stem in your yard, some of the practices are complete removal, partial removal. I do what I call reduction of the like a subordination of the smaller of the two codominant leaves, especially if it has an inclusion. Then I definitely want to bring that down without throwing the complete shape of the tree out. You can actually come down on one 4 or 5 feet and take that top side out of that one within a season or two. That those green branches are going to fill it back in, and you've reduced that torquing in the wind that typically causes them to break. So that's something we do with the codominants. Crown rejuvenation, that's your lilacs, your elderberries, your larger shrubs, basically your caraganas. Go in, take out bigger, older stems. So if there's 20 of them, I'm probably going to take out 4 or 5 a year, or 3 or 4 a year, depending on how thick it's going to be and its purpose. If it's to keep foxes out of your yard, that you want it as thick as possible, obviously. But for typical uses in the city, that's what we typically do. Is one out of every 4 stems, we'll take the biggest, oldest one out. That reduces the height back, provides more energy for the others, and maybe sometimes causes another couple of little suckers to come up as an ongoing rejuvenation process. Timing of all this kind of stuff is very important for a lot of purposes. For production purposes on your apples or any of your fruit trees for that matter, you want to be doing that early in the season. February, March is the time to enhance the production feature of your apple trees and apricots and whatever else we got growing on down here, cherries. If you're trying to control the growth, you want to be doing some what they call spur pruning. And spurs are just little wrinkled up. They look like buds, but they have no bud scales on them. They just have little wrinkles like a squashed hot dog or something. Once you've seen them, you'll understand the difference between that and a bud. And a bud has scales. The little spurs don't have any scales on them, so you can take out every second one. That'll direct more energy into the other spurs. That'll give you bigger, better, healthier fruit and more space to grow, more sunlight to develop properly. So that's and it'll give you a more aesthetic tree too. It's going to have that umbrella type shape to it. If that's what you're looking for, you can do that with your nicking, notching, and with your spur pruning in conjunction with that. Live tissue cuts on conifers, I recommend May, June. You're kind of avoiding the rainy area and the early season sporulation of like Cytospora and Rhizosphaeriae and stuff like that. You're avoiding that process by doing it in May, June sort of thing. If you do it later, you're encouraging other problems, and that's just not a good timing. Live tissue cuts on your grape trees, your grapes and your birches, your maples and your nut trees. July, August is always the best for those particular species. You don't end up with the sap flow, and they have a chance to compartmentalize properly without making a mess and attracting insects and disease by releasing those pheromones. The elms, obviously, we have to save those for winter time, end of March, up to the end of March, and from October 1st to the end of March, and that's kind of the timeline here in Alberta. So each province has its own times, but winter. Wait till it's cold, then you don't have the elm bark beetle bugging around and popping into the trees and causing problems with Dutch elm disease. Flush cuts versus steps. I don't like flush cuts at all. We're not making 2x4s. There's no reason to do flush cuts. I would rather have a little bit of a stub beyond the reaction zone. You see that little part of the tree where it comes off the trunk, and it's kind of swelled up. Outside of that area is where you want to make that cut. So a little bit longer than maybe you would want to. It's better to have a little bit of a stub than a flush cut, because flush cut just allows it to start rotting right there. And having done that having done that cut, if it's a bigger branch, I do a 3-cut system. So I do an undercut and a top cut, break the branch off, and then I do finish cut at that just outside of that reaction zone to create that nice little donut that you see on a lot of trees. That's a proper cut. If you do the here's your branch, and you do the undercut here, and then you come along and you do your top cut back here, it's going to jump a bit. It's going to give you, 5 or 6 inches of a jump out, depending on the length of the branch, of course. So if you're right over top of a service line or right over top of a greenhouse or something, and you don't have it tied off or whatever, you can get a little bit of a jump. It's not going to give you much, but it's going to give you a little bit. Conversely, if you cut the undercut here, and then you do the other cut back here, that's a drop cut, so that's just going to drop basically straight down for you, and not make it's not going to tip out and hit the tips of the branches and come back and take out your ladder on you, or anything else for that matter. Always prune to a bud growing in the direction you want the plant to grow. So nicking, notching, pruning with your secateurs or your hand saws or whatever back to a bud. That the bud you're pruning back to is the one that's going to develop into, the branch that's going to continue on. So prune to the bud growing the direction you want it to grow. That's pretty much it. So I just wanted to kind of touch on the pruning techniques and timing for you folks. And I want you to know that trees live long and they die slow, and play safe out there. Thank you. Bye for now.